From accidental injuries that became part of the film to a misspelled hospital sign that achieved legendary status, John Woo's Hong Kong masterpiece hides some extraordinary secrets behind its blood-soaked action. This groundbreaking thriller didn't just revolutionize action cinema. It survived funding crises, panicked police calls, and sample dialogue that shaped hip-hop history. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about the killer. Fact 1. Chow Yun-fat saved the film from never being made. The Killer almost never made it to the screen, and the only reason audiences got to see this masterpiece was because its star literally saved it with his own money. After John Woo completed A Better Tomorrow 2 in 1987, his relationship with producer Tsui Hark had deteriorated badly. The two had clashed over creative decisions during that production, with Hark feeling that Woo had ruined the film and eventually asking Woo's colleague to fire him from the studio. When Woo wanted to make The Killer as his next project, Hark's financial backing became problematic and eventually fell through completely, leaving the director without the funds needed to bring his vision to life. This was a devastating blow because Woo had already developed the rough draft of the script and had a clear vision of the story he wanted to tell about honor, friendship, and two men on opposite sides of the law finding common ground. Without a producer willing to finance the film, the project seemed dead in the water. That's when Chow Yun-fat, who had worked with Woo on both A Better Tomorrow films and believed deeply in the director's talent, made an extraordinary decision. The actor stepped in and personally enlisted Golden Princess Film, the company he was contracted with at the time, to fund part of the project. Danny Lee, who was cast to play the detective, also contributed through his production company, Magnum, which was necessary because Lee was under an exclusive contract with Cinema City. Thanks to Chow's intervention and willingness to put his professional relationships on the line, The Killer finally got the green light for production, ultimately becoming one of the most influential action films ever made. Fact 2. The iconic standoff was inspired by Mad Magazine. One of the most memorable images from The Killer shows Chow Yun-fat and Danny Lee pointing guns directly at each other's faces in a tense standoff, and the inspiration for this iconic shot came from an unlikely source, a satirical comic strip in Mad Magazine. John Woo grew up reading Mad Magazine as a child and was particularly fascinated by the Spy vs. Spy comic strip created by Cuban cartoonist Antonio Prohias. The wordless strip featured two spies, one dressed entirely in white and the other in black, who were always at war with each other using elaborate booby traps and schemes. What captivated young Woo was the underlying friendship between these adversaries, and he carried that concept with him into adulthood. When describing his vision for the relationship between the assassin Ah Jong and Detective Li Ying in The Killer, Woo explained that he loved how the white bird and black bird in Spy vs. Spy were always against each other, but deep in their hearts they were still friendly, and that idea became central to his film. The face-off scene where both men circle each other with guns drawn, maintaining strained smiles so they won't alarm the blind singer Jenny, became the perfect visual embodiment of this concept of détente, crossed with mutual assured destruction. It's a masterful representation of two men who should be enemies but recognize something honorable in each other. This image has since become not just the most iconic moment from The Killer, but arguably the defining visual for Hong Kong action cinema in general, proving that inspiration can come from the most unexpected places, even the pages of a humor magazine. Fact 3. Residents called police during tram shootout. The Killer featured several shootouts filmed on the streets of Hong Kong, and the production's commitment to realism created some serious problems with local residents who couldn't tell the difference between movie violence and the real thing. During the filming of the scene where Danny Lee's character chases a gunman onto a tram in the Causeway Bay district, the crew only had 3 hours to complete the sequence, which meant they needed to work fast and efficiently. The production used blank rounds for authenticity, but these blanks were so incredibly loud that they sounded exactly like real gunfire echoing through the busy shopping district. Terrified residents who heard the explosions and saw men with guns running through the streets immediately. assumed they were witnessing an actual armed robbery in progress, and frantically called the police to report the crime. When Hong Kong police officers arrived on the scene, ready to respond to what they believed was a genuine emergency, they found a film crew in the middle of shooting an action sequence. Fortunately for the production, many local police officers were actually fans of John Woo's work and were generally supportive of Hong Kong cinema. However, the situation was serious enough that Danny Lee himself, who had actually trained to be a real police officer before becoming an actor, had to personally speak with the police superintendent to explain what was happening and get permission to continue filming. The superintendent eventually allowed them to resume work, but the incident highlighted just how realistic and intense the film's action sequences were, to the point where they could fool an entire neighborhood into thinking violence was genuinely occurring on their streets. Fact 4. Chow Yun-fat's real injury stayed in the film. The climactic church shootout in The Killer is one of the most spectacular action sequences ever filmed, but it was also genuinely dangerous for everyone involved, and the evidence of that danger ended up permanently visible on screen. During the filming of this massive finale, which took 36 days to complete, a piece of plaster was blown off the church wall by the force of the explosive squibs being used to simulate bullet hits. This chunk of debris struck Chow Yun-fat directly in the face, cutting him badly and missing his eye by only about 1 inch. If the plaster had hit just slightly higher, it could have blinded the film's star and potentially ended his career. It was a terrifying moment that could have shut down production entirely while Chow recovered in a hospital. However, demonstrating the incredible dedication and toughness that made him a Hong Kong action star, Chow Yun-fat made a remarkable decision on the spot. Rather than stopping production and going to get medical treatment for the wound, he suggested to John Woo that they should keep filming and incorporate his real bloody injury into the scene. Woo agreed, and if you watch carefully during the part where Ah Jong and Inspector Lee talk before leaving the church near the end of the battle, you can clearly see the fresh cut below Chow's left eye with real blood visible on his face. The injury adds an extra layer of authenticity to the sequence, making the violence feel genuinely dangerous and the character's suffering more visceral. This incident also demonstrated the extreme conditions under which Hong Kong action films were made during this era, where safety took a back seat to capturing the perfect shot. Fact 5. The dragon boat scene was shot with documentary footage. The assassination sequence during the Dragon Boat Festival is one of the most thrilling moments in The Killer, but the way John Woo managed to film it reveals his incredible resourcefulness in overcoming bureaucratic obstacles. Getting permits to film action sequences in Hong Kong was notoriously difficult, and the authorities were extremely reluctant to allow movie productions to disrupt major public events like the annual Dragon Boat Race Festival. Woo wanted to stage a dramatic assassination during this festival, using the crowds and racing boats as a chaotic backdrop, but he knew that getting official permission would be nearly impossible. His solution was brilliantly deceptive. Woo approached the authorities, claiming he wanted to film a documentary about Hong Kong's dragon boat race tradition, which was much easier to get approved than an action movie shoot. The festival occurred 5 months before The Killer actually started principal photography, and Woo used this opportunity to capture extensive footage of the real boat races, the crowds, and the general atmosphere of the event. He shot the bulk of this background material with a documentary crew, then carefully stored the footage. Months later, when production on The Killer began, Woo brought in a much smaller crew and his actors to film the specific story elements involving the assassination, keeping this guerrilla filmmaking as low-key as possible. The director then spent 3 weeks personally editing the sequence himself, meticulously interweaving the documentary footage with the dramatic material to create a seamless whole. Woo even approached the editing process like he was choreographing a musical number, cutting everything in time to the soundtrack to make the violence feel rhythmic and balletic, rather than chaotic. Fact 6. Scared Heart Hospital became action cinema's most famous typo. During the sequence where Chow Yun-fat's character rushes a wounded child to the hospital while being pursued by the police, careful viewers notice something odd about one of the signs visible in the scene. As the characters pass by the hospital entrance, an English-language sign clearly reads, "Scared Heart Hospital," instead of the correct Sacred Heart Hospital, turning what should be a religious reference into an accidentally hilarious description of a frightening medical facility. This simple spelling error, likely made by someone on the production crew whose first language was not English, has achieved legendary status among fans and film historians. According to Hong Kong cinema expert Bay Logan, who provided commentary on the film's special edition release, this typo has been called the most famous misprint in action film history. The error is so well known that it has become a beloved part of the killer's legacy, with fans affectionately pointing it out during screenings and using it as an example of the rough and ready nature of Hong Kong film productions during the 1980s. What makes the mistake particularly charming is that it actually kind of works thematically, since the hospital sequence is indeed a scary and tense moment in the film, with Ah Jong holding a police sergeant at gunpoint while desperately waiting for the child to regain consciousness. The sign has been preserved in every release of the film, becoming an inadvertent piece of cinema history that demonstrates how even mistakes can become iconic when they appear in a movie that achieves classic status and gets watched by millions of people who notice every detail. Fact 7. John Woo never used storyboards to prevent idea theft. Most major action films are meticulously planned with detailed storyboards that show exactly how each shot will be framed and how the action will unfold. But John Woo took a completely different approach when making The Killer that kept his cast and crew constantly on their toes. Woo never used storyboards for any of the action sequences, instead choosing to improvise everything on set with his actors, stuntmen, and stunt director working out the choreography in the moment. He had two specific reasons for this unconventional method. First, he wanted to prevent his innovative ideas from being stolen by other filmmakers who might see the storyboards during pre-production, which was a legitimate concern in the competitive Hong Kong film industry where concepts could be copied and rushed into production by rival studios. Second, and perhaps more importantly, Woo explained that he preferred to work as an artist, like a painter, allowing his mood and instincts to guide him rather than following a predetermined plan. This improvisational approach meant that nobody on set, not even the lead actors, ever knew exactly what they would be filming until they arrived, and Woo began blocking out the scene. Even when planning non-action scenes, Woo often changed things at the last minute based on his intuition. For example, most of the dialogue in the pivotal apartment scene where Sidney double-crosses Jeff was improvised rather than scripted. According to producer Terrence Chang, this made Woo difficult to work with as a very intuitive filmmaker, since the production team never had advance notice of what would be required for any given day of shooting, but it also gave the film a spontaneous energy and creativity. Fact 8. The Beach House Shootout took 28 days to film. The Killer features multiple spectacular action sequences, but one particular shootout required an extraordinary amount of time and effort to capture on film. The action scene that takes place inside and around the beach house, where Ah Jong faces an ambush from Triad hitmen, took a staggering 28 days to shoot. To put that in perspective, many entire movies are filmed in less time than this single sequence required. This extended filming schedule was partly due to John Woo's perfectionist approach and his desire to choreograph every moment of the gunfight with balletic precision, making sure each shot composition, each burst of violence, and each stunt was executed exactly as he envisioned it. The beach house location itself was filmed in Stanley, Hong Kong, though Woo had originally wanted to find a house right on a beach, but couldn't locate a suitable property that met his specific needs. The overall production of The Killer lasted 92 days, which was nearly double the amount of time typically allocated for Hong Kong film productions during the 1980s era. Even by the standards of Hong Kong cinema, which was known for fast-paced productions that could complete entire films in a matter of weeks, this was an unusually long and ambitious shoot. The extended schedule also made the filming more dangerous as the crew pushed themselves to create increasingly elaborate action sequences. The chaotic production conditions were intense enough that Sally Ye got shrapnel in her leg at one point, demonstrating that the dangers extended beyond just the lead actors. However, all of this effort paid off, as the film's action sequences set a new standard for how gun battles could be filmed and influenced countless action directors in both Asia and Hollywood. Fact 9. Chow Yun-fat turned down Morpheus in The Matrix. After The Killer became an international sensation and helped introduce Western audiences to Hong Kong action cinema, Hollywood came, calling for Chow Yun-fat with some incredibly high-profile offers that would have made him a massive star in American movies. Among the roles he was offered, two stand out as particularly significant in terms of what might have been. Chow was approached to play the role of Morpheus in The Matrix, which was released in 1999 and became one of the most influential science fiction films ever made. He was also offered a role in Alien Resurrection, which came out in 1997 as the fourth film in the Alien franchise. Both of these projects had major budgets and would have given Chow a prominent place in American cinema at the peak of his career. However, the actor turned down both offers, instead choosing to make his Hollywood debut in two different films: The Replacement Killers, released in 1998, and The Corruptor, which came out in 1999. While these films gave Chow his first lead roles in American productions, neither achieved the massive cultural impact or lasting legacy of The Matrix, which went on to revolutionize action filmmaking with its innovative special effects and philosophical themes. The role of Morpheus eventually went to Lawrence Fishburne, who delivered an iconic performance that became one of the most memorable characters in science fiction cinema. Looking back, Chow's decision represents one of the most interesting what-if scenarios in action movie history, as his presence in The Matrix would have created a direct link between the Hong Kong action style that influenced the film and the movie itself, potentially changing how audiences perceived both the character and the overall production. Fact 10. Wu-Tang Clan's album heavily sampled. The film. The Killer's influence extended far beyond cinema into the world of hip-hop music in a way that created an unexpected friendship between John Woo and one of rap's most innovative groups. In 1995, Wu-Tang Clan member Raekwon released his critically acclaimed solo debut album Only Built for Cuban Links, which is now considered one of the greatest hip-hop albums ever made and was nicknamed the Purple Tape because of its distinctive purple-tinted cassette packaging. The album extensively sampled dialogue from The Killer throughout its tracks, using the film's audio to create interludes and add cinematic atmosphere to the music. Producer Arza, who was the creative mastermind behind Wu-Tang's sound, explained that he used The Killer because Raekwon and Ghostface Killah were two opposite guys from different neighborhoods, much like how the film features Chow Yun-fat and Danny Lee as characters who have to become partners to work things out. The album included samples from multiple scenes, with the opening line from one track featuring the memorable quote describing the killer as someone who looks determined without being ruthless. When John Woo learned that his film had been sampled so extensively on a major hip-hop album, his reaction surprised everyone. Rather than demanding payment or threatening legal action for unauthorized use of his work, Woo felt honored that the Wu-Tang Clan had found his film meaningful enough to incorporate into their art. He refused to accept any monetary compensation from Arza and the group, essentially giving them his blessing to use the material for free. This generous gesture led to a genuine friendship between Woo and the Wu-Tang members. In 2005, Vibe magazine placed The Killer at number 21 on their list of the top 50 films that shaped hip-hop. Fact 11. Handel's Messiah replaced action music. During Virgin Mary's destruction. The climactic church shootout in The Killer is a masterpiece of action choreography and editing, but one of its most striking moments comes from an unexpected musical choice that created a powerful contrast between the sacred and the profane. During the massive gunfight, one of the villains uses a shotgun to blow apart the church's centerpiece statue of the Virgin Mary, destroying this symbol of purity and innocence in an act that represents the corruption of the sacred space by violence. At this precise moment of destruction, the film's action music suddenly transitions to the overture from Messiah by George Friedrich Handel, the famous Baroque oratorio about the life of Jesus Christ. This wasn't John Woo's original plan for the scene. Instead, it was the brilliant idea of editor David Woo, who felt that maintaining the driving action score throughout the entire extended shootout would create a numbing effect where the kinetic violence would start to lose its emotional impact on the audience. By switching to Handel's soaring, majestic classical music at this critical moment, Woo created a jarring contrast that makes viewers stop and really feel the tragedy of what's happening, as the church that served as Ahjong's sanctuary and place of peace is transformed into a battlefield. The choice reflects Woo's Christian faith and his use of religious imagery throughout the film. Though Woo has stated that The Killer is not a religious film, he filled the production with Catholic symbolism, including the prominent placement of crosses, candles, and religious statuary. The use of Handel's Messiah makes the violence feel less like entertainment and more like a genuine desecration, reinforcing the film's themes about how violence corrupts everything it touches. Fact 12. The film bombed due to Tiananmen Square timing. The Killer's initial release in Hong Kong was catastrophically timed in a way that turned what should have been a commercial success into a disappointing box office failure, though the reasons had nothing to do with the quality of the film itself. The movie was first released in Taiwan in March of 1989 with a running time of 124 minutes, then cut down to 110 minutes for its Hong Kong release on July 6, 1989. This was just 1 month after the Tiananmen Square massacre on June 4, 1989, when Chinese government forces violently suppressed student-led pro-democracy demonstrations in Beijing, resulting in hundreds or possibly thousands of deaths. The people of Hong Kong had followed these events closely, with over 1 million residents marching in solidarity with the Beijing protesters on May 21st. And when the massacre occurred, the reaction was shock, horror, and deep despair about what the 1997 handover to China might mean for their own future. Into this traumatized atmosphere came The Killer, with its extremely graphic violence and rivers of blood spilled during elaborate gunfights. The film's violent imagery was too close to the real-world tragedy that had just occurred, making audiences uncomfortable rather than entertained. According to film historians, the graphic violence mirrored the tragedy in a way that made The Killer feel inappropriate and even offensive to Hong Kong audiences who were still processing their grief and fear. The film struggled at the box office and was not an immediate success in its home territory, eventually earning $18 million and reaching only 9th place at the 1989 Hong Kong box office. However, the film received critical acclaim internationally when it played at film festivals, becoming a sensation in the Western world. Fact 13. Woo was offered to direct Chicago. The musical, John Woo's love of musicals, is well documented and might seem surprising given his reputation as an action director, but he has always viewed his action sequences as being closely related to dance and musical choreography. This passion for the musical genre led to an opportunity that Woo had to reluctantly turn down. According to film historian Bay Logan's commentary on The Killer's special edition release, Woo was offered the chance to direct a film version of Chicago, the famous Bob Fosse musical about murder, corruption, and celebrity in 1920s Chicago. This would have been a dream project for Woo, who has frequently stated that he approaches action scenes with the same mindset that choreographers bring to dance numbers, even going so far as to edit action sequences in time to the soundtrack as if they were musical performances. When editing the Dragon Boat assassination scene in The Killer, Woo specifically thought of the sequence as a musical number and cut it with that rhythm in mind. However, due to other professional commitments and scheduling conflicts, Woo had to decline the opportunity to direct Chicago. The eventual film version of Chicago wasn't made until 2002, directed by Rob Marshall, and went on to win the Academy Award for Best Picture. Woo has expressed disappointment about missing the chance to work on this project, as it would have allowed him to combine his two great loves, the balletic choreography of his action style with actual musical numbers. In recent years, Woo has discussed his desire to create what he calls an action musical, describing it as a combination of The Killer and Bob Fosse's Cabaret, with a tough gangster who is also a great dancer. Fact 14. The body count reached 120 deaths. The killer is known for its intense and prolonged action sequences, but the actual number of on-screen deaths throughout the film is staggering enough to place it among the bloodiest action movies of the 1980s era. According to Hong Kong cinema expert Bay Logan, who provided detailed commentary for the film's special edition release, the total body count in The Killer caps out at exactly 120 people killed. This number might actually seem low to some viewers given how chaotic and explosive the action feels, but Logan's careful tally accounts for every confirmed death shown on screen. To put this in perspective, this is significantly higher than most Hollywood action films of the same period, which typically featured far fewer on-screen deaths even in their most violent moments. The body count is spread across multiple major action sequences throughout the film, starting with the opening nightclub assassination and building through the Dragon Boat Festival hit, the beach house ambush, and finally the apocalyptic church shootout that serves as the film's climax. The church sequence alone accounts for dozens of deaths as wave after wave of triad gangsters storm the building and are gunned down by Ah Jong and Inspector Lee working together. What makes the violence even more impactful is that John Woo never cuts away from the consequences, showing blood spurting from wounds and bodies falling in slow motion to emphasize the human cost of every death. This approach to filming violence influenced an entire generation of action filmmakers and helped establish what became known as the heroic bloodshed subgenre of Hong Kong cinema, where the body counts were high, but the violence was treated with a certain operatic gravity rather than being played for cheap thrills. Fact 15. Sally Ye's schedule changed the original ending. The ending of The Killer that audiences know and love, with its melancholic harmonica music and ambiguous final shot, was actually not what John Woo originally planned for the film's conclusion. The director had envisioned a completely different final scene that would have provided more closure for the character of Jenny, the nightclub singer who was blinded by Ah Jong's muzzle flash and became the emotional center of the story. In the original script, the film was supposed to end with Jenny waiting at an airport for Inspector Lee to arrive and give her the money that Ah Jong had earned for her eye operation, after which she would board a plane and travel to the United States to have the surgery performed by more experienced doctors, potentially regaining her sight and starting a new life far from Hong Kong. This ending would have been more hopeful and would have shown the completion of Ah Jong's redemptive arc even after his death. However, Sally Ye was an incredibly popular canto-pop singer at the time of filming, comparable to Whitney Houston or Mariah Carey in terms of her celebrity status in Hong Kong, and her schedule was packed with concert performances and recording commitments. Her tight filming schedule made it impossible to arrange the time needed to shoot the airport scene, which would have required coordinating the location, extras, and multiple camera setups. Faced with this practical limitation, Woo had to come up with a replacement ending on short notice. He chose to conclude with the image of a man, presumably Inspector Lee, playing a harmonica in front of the bullet-riddled church, creating a more ambiguous and mournful